My name is Amy Howell, and I am 20 years old now. But this story begins 2 years ago, right before I turned 18, when I finally understood exactly where I stood in my family. Growing up in suburban Phoenix from the outside, my family looked like a picture perfect success story. My father, Kenneth Howell, owned a mid sized construction company, specializing in custom homes. My mother, Linda Howell, worked as a real estate agent for a high-end firm that sold million-dollar houses to tech executives and retirees escaping colder states. Together, they made around $220,000 a year, lived in a gated community, had a pool in the backyard, and drove new cars every few years. On paper, we were everything people admired. But inside that house, I learned early that love wasn't divided equally, it was assigned. My older sister, Brittany Howell, was 6 years older than me and had been the center of my parents' universe since the day she was born. From the time I could remember, Brittany didn't just receive attention, she commanded it. Loudly, dramatically, emotionally. If she cried, the house stopped. If she screamed, everything else became irrelevant. If she threatened to fall apart. My parents dropped whatever they were doing to contain the situation. They called her sensitive. They called her emotionally fragile. They said she felt things more deeply than other people. What that really meant was that Brittany learned very early that tears and tantrums were currency. By the time I was old enough to notice the imbalance, it was already permanent. Brittany got a brand new white BMW for her 16th birthday, custom rims, leather interior. The kind of car that turned heads in the school parking lot. I got my father's old work truck when I turned 16. 200,000 miles. Rust spots on the doors. The radio only played AM stations unless you held the knob just right. No one ever said it outright, but the message was clear. She was an investment. I was an afterthought. Brittany received a $3,200 monthly allowance throughout her on and off college years. I worked 25 hours a week at a local gym just to afford gas, clothes, and school supplies. When she wanted to redecorate her bedroom for the third time in 2 years, my parents spent $8,000 on designer furniture from a boutique in Scottsdale. When I asked for help buying textbooks for my AP classes, they told me I needed to learn financial responsibility. When Brittany wanted to spend a month in Europe with her sorority sisters, they covered the entire $6,000 trip without blinking. When I asked to attend a leadership camp that cost $400, they told me the family budget was tight that month. The disparity wasn't subtle, it was constant, relentless, and exhausting. And yet somehow I was the one holding everything together. While Brittany treated college like a prolonged vacation, skipping classes, partying, failing courses, I maintained a 4.2 GPA, worked part-time, volunteered at an animal shelter, tutored younger students for free, and quietly took on responsibilities my parents never acknowledged. I paid attention to overdue bills. I picked up dry cleaning. I grocery shopped. I meal planned. I cleaned up Brittany's messes, both literal and emotional. Whenever Brittany had a crisis, I became the solution. When she crashed her BMW while texting and driving, I spent an entire weekend helping my father deal with insurance and paperwork. When she failed organic chemistry twice, I tutored her for months. When she was arrested for underage drinking, I was the one sent to pick her up at 3 in the morning because my parents were too emotionally drained. But when Brittany finally passed community college 2 years late, she was celebrated as a hero. When I succeeded, it was expected. I kept telling myself things would change when I turned 18. Legal adult, college acceptance, a clean slate. I believed naively that my 18th birthday would finally make them see me. I had no idea it would become the moment that proved they never would. For years, I had imagined my 18th birthday like it was a finish line. Not a wild party, not anything extravagant, just one day where I wouldn't be invisible. One day where I didn't exist solely to stabilize Brittany's chaos or quietly make my parents' lives easier. Turning 18 meant legal adulthood, yes, but more than that, it felt like proof that I mattered, or at least it was supposed to. I was graduating high school in a few months. I had already been accepted to Arizona State University with partial scholarships based on my GPA and extracurriculars. I had worked hard, sacrificed, stayed disciplined, while everyone around me told me I was so mature for my age in a tone that somehow always meant you don't need anything. I truly believed that this milestone might finally force my parents to acknowledge who I was. So for the first time in my life, I asked for something. I asked if we could have a birthday party. Nothing extravagant. Just family, a few friends from school, and work, maybe 25 or 30 people. Backyard setup. Grill some food. Music. A cake. I even offered to help pay for part of it with money I'd saved from working at the gym. To my shock, my parents agreed. At first, they didn't just agree, they leaned into it. My mother told her clients, "Our baby is becoming a woman." My father joked about renting one of those inflatable obstacle courses for nostalgia. We planned for weeks. Invitations went out 3 weeks in advance. A custom cake was ordered from the expensive bakery downtown. Decorations were picked. A playlist was carefully curated to appeal to different age groups. For once, people were coming for me. My best friend Marcus, my boyfriend Daniel Reyes, who had stood by me through years of emotional neglect he never quite understood. Friends from the gym. Teammates. Even my favorite teacher, the one who believed in me, when my parents never showed up for award ceremonies or parent nights. This party wasn't about cake or gifts. It was about being seen. 3 days before the party, everything collapsed. Brittany's spring break trip to Cancun was canceled. She had been planning that trip for months. Luxury resort, beachfront clubs, professional, Instagram photos, the full influencer fantasy she was obsessed with. My father had already spent over $4,500 on flights, resort fees, and spending money. Brittany had bought new bikinis, designer luggage, gotten spray tans. The cancellation happened because her friend group imploded over some dramatic fallout that I never fully understood and honestly didn't care to. What mattered was Brittany's reaction. She came home Friday afternoon in full meltdown mode, crying, screaming, throwing things, slamming doors, acting like someone had died instead of missing a vacation most people could never afford. My parents went into emergency response. My mother canceled client meetings. My father canceled his weekend plans. They ordered Brittany's favorite Thai food from across town, ran her a bubble bath with overpriced bath bombs, even called her therapist for an emergency session. By Saturday morning, less than 24 hours before my party, I was in the kitchen at 7 a.m., prepping food and hanging decorations when Brittany came downstairs in silk pajamas, eyes red, but voice steady. "I can't handle having a party here tomorrow," she said calmly, like she was announcing a medical condition. I froze. What I asked, "I'm too emotionally fragile right now," she continued. The noise, all those people, it'll trigger my anxiety about the trip situation and set back my emotional recovery. My stomach dropped. "Brittany," I said carefully, "it's my birthday. People are already coming. This has been planned for weeks." She sighed, tears welling on cue. "I know. I feel terrible about the timing, but I'm really going through something traumatic right now." My mother immediately nodded. "She has a point, Amy. Your sister is dealing with a lot of disappointment. This Cancun situation really shook her." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "This is my 18th birthday," I said. "This is a milestone." That's when Brittany played her favorite card. "If you really cared about me as your sister," she said softly, "you'd postpone it. Family supports each other during hard times. They don't make things worse by being selfish." My father walked in just in time to hear that sentence and sided with her instantly. "Your sister needs us right now," he said. "You're strong. You can handle disappointment. She's not built the same way you are." I tried to explain. The planning, the invitations, the people I had invited, the significance. He cut me off. "We'll reschedule. Family comes first." Just like that. 18 years of being invisible crystallized into one sentence. I spent the rest of that day making humiliating phone calls, canceling, apologizing, lying, telling people I was sick because I couldn't bring myself to say the truth that my family had canceled my birthday to accommodate my sister's canceled vacation. Daniel was hurt. My friends were confused. My teacher sounded concerned. My boss thought it was strange. Meanwhile, Brittany lounged by the pool in a designer bikini posting moody Instagram stories about processing disappointment and finding peace in unexpected changes. That night, sitting alone in my room, staring at decorations that would never be used, something inside me went quiet. I wasn't angry. I was done. The morning of my 18th birthday arrived without ceremony. No balloons, no cake, no quiet knock on my door, no happy birthday. It felt like waking up on any other Sunday except heavier, like the air itself had settled into my chest. I lay in bed for a few minutes, listening to the house move without me, cabinets opening, the blender roaring to life downstairs. My mother was making Brittany her favorite protein smoothie with those expensive organic powders she insisted were essential. My father had already left for a construction site because apparently my birthday didn't qualify as a reason to take a day off. I got dressed slowly, deliberately, trying to feel something. Anger, sadness, anything. What I felt instead was clarity. Around noon, Brittany wandered past my room, scrolling through her phone, chewing on a piece of avocado toast my mother had prepared specially for her. She glanced at me like I was an inconvenience. "You've been really quiet," she said. "You're kind of bringing down the mood." I stared at her, stunned. "It's not my fault your party got canceled," she continued. "You don't have to take your bad mood out on everyone else. Some of us are dealing with real problems." Something snapped, but not loudly. It was the quiet click of a door closing inside my mind. I realized in that moment that I was waiting for people who were never going to choose me. And worse, I had been helping them do it. I went back into my room, closed the door, and sat on my bed. For the first time in my life, I didn't try to rationalize their behavior. I didn't defend them. I didn't ask what I could do better. I asked myself one question instead. What would my life look like if I stopped trying to earn love that was never going to be given? I was 18 now, legally an adult. I had money saved. I had scholarships. I had people outside this house who saw my value. I had options, and I had never allowed myself to consider them before. I picked up my phone and made the first call. My wrestling coach answered on the second ring. His family had always treated me kindly, and I knew they had an extra room since their oldest son had gone off to college. I didn't give him every detail, just enough. His response was immediate. "Amy," his wife said, when she took the phone, "you're like a daughter to us. You can stay as long as you need." I barely managed to thank her before my voice broke. The second call was to my boss at the gym. When I asked about picking up more hours, maybe even full-time, he didn't hesitate. "You're the most responsible person I've ever hired," he said. "If you're trying to build independence, I'll help however I can." The third call was the hardest. My school counselor answered from her home number, clearly surprised. By the time I finished explaining, she was quiet for a long moment. "What your parents did was not okay," she said finally. "An 18th birthday is a major milestone. Canceling it for those reasons shows a serious problem with priorities." By Sunday evening, I had a plan. I didn't announce it. I didn't confront anyone. I didn't cry or threaten or plead. I became strategic. For the next week, I acted normal. I went to school, worked my shifts, completed assignments, smiled at dinner. My parents thought I was handling disappointment maturely, and I could tell they were proud that I wasn't causing trouble. What they didn't know was that I was quietly moving my life out of their house. A few things at a time. Important documents, clothes, electronics, books, wrestling trophies, anything that mattered. I took them to my coach's house, slowly emptying my room in ways that weren't immediately obvious. I also stopped doing things. I didn't remind my father about bill due dates. I didn't organize my mother's calendar. I didn't grocery shop or meal plan. I didn't clean Brittany's messes. The following Saturday, exactly 1 week after my canceled birthday, I waited until my parents were out and Brittany was at the mall spending money she didn't earn. I packed the rest of my belongings into boxes and garbage bags. I stripped my room of everything that belonged to me until it looked like I had never lived there at all. I left my house key on the bed. Next to it, a note. "Since my needs, feelings, and milestones don't seem to matter in this family, I've decided to go somewhere they do. Don't contact me unless you're ready to genuinely apologize and make real changes. This isn't a tantrum. This is me choosing people who treat me like I matter." I loaded my truck, took one last look at the house that had never really been home, and drove away. I didn't cry. I felt free. Living with my coach's family felt like stepping into a life I hadn't known existed. From the very first night, the difference was disorienting. They didn't treat me like a temporary inconvenience or a problem to manage. They treated me like a person who belonged. My coach's wife asked what foods I liked and adjusted dinner plans to include me. His younger daughter insisted on showing me where the extra blankets were in case it gets cold at night. No one demanded explanations. No one made me justify my presence. They simply welcomed me. At dinner that first evening, everyone sat at the table together. They talked. They laughed. They asked about my day and actually waited for my answer. When I mentioned I had a big exam coming up, my coach offered to help me review after dinner. Not because he expected anything in return, but because that's what people do when they care. It took weeks before I stopped bracing myself for disappointment. Slowly, I let myself relax. I kept my grades up. I increased my hours at the gym. I trained hard, competed, and won matches. For the first time in my life, the effort I put into things was met with encouragement instead of silence. When I did well, people noticed. When I struggled, they helped. And for the first time, I wasn't exhausted from carrying everyone else. Meanwhile, my old family was unraveling without me. At first, I didn't hear much. A missed call here, a vague text there. I ignored them all. But information has a way of traveling, especially in a tight suburban community. Through mutual friends, former teammates, and neighbors, I started hearing about the cracks forming. Bills were late, appointments were missed. My mother lost a major real estate client because she forgot a deadline I used to track for her. My father paid late fees on multiple credit cards because no one reminded him. 3 weeks after I left, they missed a mortgage payment. Then there was Brittany. Without me there to tutor her, remind her of assignments, or quietly fix her mistakes, she fell apart fast. She failed 2 classes that semester and was placed on academic probation. My father hired a private tutor at $75 an hour, but Brittany skipped sessions because she didn't vibe with the teaching style. Then she was arrested again, this time for shoplifting at a boutique in Scottsdale. She'd been stealing makeup accessories and clothes despite having more than enough money. She was caught trying to walk out with a $300 purse, and the store pressed charges. My parents hired an attorney, paid thousands in legal fees, covered restitution, and still they didn't hold her accountable. The real bomb dropped when they discovered Brittany had been stealing from them for years. With me gone, no one balanced accounts or made excuses. Credit card charges surfaced. Missing cash added up. Forged signatures on checks were uncovered. The total came to over $35,000 in unauthorized spending, money that could have paid for my college. Instead of confronting her, my parents doubled down on enabling. My father took out a second mortgage to cover her debts. My mother worked 7 days a week trying to hold everything together. I watched all of this unfold from a distance through social media gossip and the occasional desperate voicemail begging me to come home and help. Notice what was missing from every message. No apology, no accountability, just need. I didn't respond. I was thriving, and without me, the illusion of their perfect family was crumbling fast. By the time I graduated high school, the collapse of my parents' household had gone from subtle cracks to visible structural damage. Without me there to quietly stabilize everything, problems didn't just appear, they stacked. One mistake triggered another and another, until even my parents couldn't pretend anymore that they were simply going through a rough patch. They were drowning, and for the first time there was no one left to quietly keep their heads above water. Brittany was the epicenter. Academic probation quickly turned into academic disaster. Without someone reminding her of deadlines, checking her work, or tutoring her through concepts she'd never bothered to learn properly, she spiraled. She skipped classes, ignored emails from professors, lied to my parents about grades until the lies collapsed under official notices. When the university finally expelled her for academic dishonesty, paying other students to write papers, cheating on online exams, and attempting to bribe a professor, my parents were blindsided. Not because the behavior was shocking, but because they could no longer hide it. My father panicked. Instead of letting Brittany face consequences, he threw money at the problem like he always had. He paid $15,000 to a sketchy online program promising a business degree in 6 months. It was a scam. The certificate meant nothing. The money was gone. At the same time, my mother's career was quietly imploding. She had built her reputation on organization reliability and polished qualities that had depended heavily on my behind-the-scenes support. Without me managing schedules, reminders, and paperwork, she missed deadlines, forgot appointments, lost clients. In Phoenix's hyper-competitive real estate market, mistakes weren't forgiven. Her commissions dropped. Then her confidence followed. My father's construction business wasn't spared either. I'd helped him with bids, estimates, and materials calculations for years, tasks he brushed off as small stuff. Without that support, he underbid jobs, overordered materials, and borrowed heavily to compensate for losses. He took loans against the business to cover Brittany's mounting expenses, convinced that one more financial rescue would fix everything. It never did. The community noticed. Brittany's shoplifting arrest appeared in the local police blotter. My parents sold the boat, then my mother's luxury car. Invitations to social events stopped arriving. Neighbors whispered. Clients disappeared. Their image, the one they had curated so carefully, started to rot in public view. And then the biggest betrayal surfaced. Over the course of a year, Brittany had opened credit cards in my parents' names, took out personal loans using their information, even secured a car loan for a vehicle she promptly totaled while driving under the influence. by the time the full scope of her fraud came to light, the debt exceeded $80,000. Combined with the stolen savings and legal fees, the total damage surpassed $125,000. They declared bankruptcy. They sold the house, the gated community, the pool, the life they'd prioritized over me. Gone. They moved into a cramped two-bedroom apartment in a part of town they used to avoid. My father's business collapsed under debt and lawsuits. My mother took a corporate real estate job that paid a fraction of what she used to earn and stripped her of autonomy. Brittany faced, with real consequences for the first time in her life, broke. She couldn't hold a job, couldn't function independently, couldn't cope with the reality that her choices had destroyed everything. She moved in with my parents and became entirely dependent emotionally, financially, practically. The stress broke my parents' marriage. After 25 years together, they separated. My father moved in with his brother and took construction jobs from former competitors. My mother worked 60-hour weeks between real estate and retail just to survive. And through all of it, they kept calling me, begging, guilt-tripping, asking me to come home and help. But I wasn't their pillar anymore. I was finally standing on my own. By the beginning of my sophomore year at Arizona State University, the damage Brittany had caused was already catastrophic, but she wasn't finished yet. At that point, my parents were barely holding on. Bankruptcy paperwork was still crawling through the system. Their credit was destroyed. My father was doing physically demanding construction work for a fraction of what he once earned. His pride eroded along with his savings. My mother was exhausted, stretched thin between jobs, grief, and denial. They told themselves that once Brittany found her footing, things would stabilize. They were wrong. Brittany had fallen in with a man who promised her a way out. Easy money, fast recovery, a chance to get back everything she'd lost. He talked about cryptocurrency like it was magic guaranteed returns, insider access, once-in-a-lifetime opportunities. To anyone with basic financial literacy, it was obviously a pyramid scheme. To Brittany, it sounded like salvation. Using the access she still had to my parents' accounts, she transferred $45,000 into the scam, every dollar of their emergency fund. Most of what remained of their retirement savings, money they had planned to use to claw their way out of the second mortgage. Within weeks, the platform vanished. The website went offline, the man disappeared, the money was gone. That loss alone would have destroyed most families. But Brittany's damage ran deeper. Over the previous year, she had quietly expanded her fraud. More credit cards, more loans, more forged signatures, a car loan in my parents' names for a vehicle she wrecked while driving under the influence. By the time everything was uncovered, the total debt attached to their identities had ballooned beyond repair. The fallout was swift and brutal. Collection agencies called nonstop. Lawsuits followed. My parents lost what little credibility they had left. The bankruptcy became unavoidable. Their professional reputations, already damaged, collapsed completely. People in the community stopped asking how they were doing. They already knew. Brittany, finally confronted with the full weight of what she'd done, spiraled. She couldn't handle the guilt, or the shame, or the reality that her parents could no longer shield her from consequences. She suffered a complete mental breakdown, panic attacks, emotional paralysis, inability to function independently. She became fully dependent on my parents in their tiny apartment, a 26-year-old woman, incapable of supporting herself. The irony was painful. They had spent decades prioritizing her comfort over my growth, and now she was everything they had left, and she was destroying them. The pressure fractured what remained of my parents' marriage. Accusations flew. Blame settled like poison. They separated quietly exhausted rather than angry, unable to look at each other without seeing their shared failures. From a distance, I watched it all. Not with glee, not with hatred, with understanding. This wasn't revenge, it was consequence. I had built a life, scholarships, promotions at work, healthy relationships, stability. Meanwhile, the family that dismissed me had collapsed under the weight of the child they refused to hold accountable. And still, they hadn't reached out with an apology. Until last month. Last month, while I was sitting at the small desk in my apartment near campus, surrounded by open textbooks and half-empty coffee cups, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. Normally, I wouldn't have answered. I had blocked every number connected to my parents over a year ago. That boundary had been deliberate and necessary. But something about the timing finale's week late evening, the quiet heaviness of the moment, made me pause. I answered. Amy, my father said softly. I almost hung up. I hadn't heard his voice in over a year, and it sounded nothing like the man I grew up with. Gone was the confidence, the authority, the certainty. What replaced it was exhaustion, deep, bone-weary exhaustion, layered with something I had never heard from him before. Defeat. Please don't hang up, he said quickly. I'm calling from my brother's phone. I know you blocked us. I know you have every right to, but we need to talk. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. For a long moment, I said nothing. Finally, I spoke. You can talk. He exhaled shakily like he'd been holding his breath for months. Your mother and I, we've lost everything. The house, the business, our savings, our marriage. We're living separately now, both working multiple minimum wage jobs just to survive. I already knew all of this. Hearing it aloud didn't shock me, but the way he said it did. There was no self-pity, no deflection, just truth. And Brittany, he continued, voice cracking. She's completely dependent on us. She can't function on her own. We don't know how to help her anymore. We don't even know how to take care of ourselves. For the first time in my life, my father sounded small. He paused, then said the words I never thought I'd hear. We know why you left. My chest tightened. We had 2 years to think, he said quietly. And we know we treated you terribly. We canceled your 18th birthday for something that didn't matter. We spent your entire childhood leaning on you while giving everything to your sister. You were holding our family together, and we threw you away. I didn't interrupt him. I let him keep going. He talked about watching my life from a distance, my grades, my scholarship, my promotion at work, how they bragged about me to people while pretending we still had a relationship, how neighbors asked about me and they didn't know what to say. Then my mother came on the line. She was crying openly, not quietly, not politely. She sounded shattered. You were the best thing about our family, she sobbed, and we didn't value you until it was too late. We don't deserve forgiveness, but we need help. Not money, just guidance, advice. We don't know how to rebuild anything without you. When they finally stopped talking, the silence stretched. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I felt power. Because I wasn't the child they could dismiss anymore. I was the adult deciding whether they were allowed back into my life. I listened until both of them ran out of words. Not because I owed them that courtesy, but because for once I was in control of the moment. They had finally reached the point I'd been living at for years. Clarity without denial, truth without defense. When the silence grew uncomfortable, I spoke. You're right, I said calmly. You don't deserve forgiveness. My mother sobbed harder. My father said nothing. You canceled my 18th birthday because Brittany's vacation was canceled. I continued. You spent my entire childhood treating me like unpaid labor while giving her everything she demanded. You taught her that consequences didn't apply to her, and now she's a financial criminal who destroyed your lives. That didn't happen by accident. You enabled it. There was no anger in my voice. That surprised even me. I don't need this family anymore, I said. I've built something better. I have people who value me, mentors who support me, a future I earned on my own. I'm not coming home to fix problems you created. The silence on the other end of the line was heavy but honest. Then I surprised all of us. But I said slowly, I'm willing to have a relationship with conditions. My father inhaled sharply. Anything. I didn't rush. I didn't soften my words. First, I said Brittany gets real long-term professional help. Not emergency therapy, not excuses. She gets a job, any job, and starts paying back what she stole. She proves she can function as an adult. My father agreed immediately. Second, I continued, you publicly acknowledge what you did, that you treated me unfairly, that canceling my birthday was wrong, that my leaving was justified. My mother whispered, we will. And third, I said, voice steady, any relationship we have going forward is based on mutual respect. I'm not your problem solver. I'm not your emotional support child. I don't fix messes. They didn't hesitate. Over the next month, I watched them follow through. My father enrolled Brittany in intensive therapy and required her to get a part-time job, her first real employment in years. My mother drafted a public apology acknowledging their failures and my justified decision to leave. They started family counseling to address the patterns that had poisoned everything they touched. Will I ever fully forgive them? Probably not. Some damage doesn't disappear just because it's finally acknowledged. But watching them lose everything they prioritized over me while I built a life defined by stability, respect, and self-worth was enough. I didn't win by destroying them. I won by choosing myself.